Imagine discovering that the people you trusted most, your own children, planned to kill your husband and were plotting against you next. One mother found shocking recordings, secret notes, and hidden evidence that would unravel a deadly family conspiracy. What she did next changed everything. Subscribe now, because the next story could be even more unbelievable than this one. My name's Margaret Cole, and for 65 years I thought I'd seen every shade of life, joy, loss, even betrayal. But nothing prepared me for the storm that came after my husband, Earl, died. People in our little town of Willow Creek, Missouri, still talk about that week. They say it started with an accident. I say it started with a lie. That morning was bright and cruelly ordinary. I remember the smell of bacon and coffee drifting through the kitchen. Earl kissed my cheek, grabbed his lunch pail, and said, "Don't wait up, honey. Gotta finish that Harley rebuild before the weekend." His bicycle and motor repair shop sat right down the road, just 5 minutes away. It was his second home, his pride. By noon, I was folding laundry when the sheriff's car rolled up outside. I felt my knees go weak before he even spoke. "Mrs. Cole," he said, eyes soft, voice careful. "There's been an accident. Earl's gone." Gone, the word tore through me like glass. They said a tire burst, he slipped, hit his head. Quick, clean, no suffering. Everyone told me it was God's mercy. But mercy doesn't leave oil stains shaped like footprints on the shop floor. Mercy doesn't make your sons refuse to meet your eyes. My boys, Caleb and Dean, hugged me that night, but something in their touch was different. Caleb's hand trembled when he passed me Earl's wedding ring. Dean couldn't even look at the photo of his father on the mantel. I chalked it up to grief, but deep down, something dark whispered, "Watch them." The funeral was small, the air heavy with lilies and whispers. I remember Caleb standing by the casket, jaw tight, like he was angry instead of heartbroken. Dean stayed at the back, fidgeting with his phone. Afterward, they insisted I let them handle everything, bank accounts, insurance, the shop. "You shouldn't worry about paperwork, Mom," Caleb said. "We'll take care of it." At first, I agreed. My heart was a cracked thing. I didn't have the strength to argue, but grief gives way to clarity. By the third week, I noticed strange charges on our joint account, transfers to names I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals at midnight. When I asked Caleb about it, he smiled that too sweet smile and said, "Just bills, Mom." Bills? Earl handled every cent with military precision. Nothing about this added up. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. The man's voice was low, almost hesitant. "Mrs. Cole, my name's Daniel Harris. I worked with your husband. I think you should see something he left behind." Something inside me froze. Left behind. "He asked me to keep it safe," Daniel said. "Told me if anything happened to him to give it to you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My husband had left something he didn't trust anyone else with, not even our sons. Daniel told me to meet him the next morning at a diner outside town. I sat up all night replaying every conversation I'd had with Earl that month. He'd been distant, distracted, checking his phone like a man carrying a secret too heavy for his pocket. The next day, I drove to that diner with my stomach in knots. Daniel was already there, a worn leather bag on the table. He looked nervous, eyes darting toward the window. He pushed the bag toward me and whispered, "Earl was scared, Mrs. Cole. He thought someone was trying to kill him." My heart stopped, the room spun. Daniel's voice cracked, and he thought it might be someone close. I remember gripping that leather bag so tight my knuckles turned white. Grief turned to fire, fear to suspicion. I didn't know yet what was inside that bag, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever killed my husband wasn't an accident. And if my sons had anything to do with it, God help them, because I wouldn't. That night, as rain lashed against my windows, I opened Earl's bag, and what I found inside would make me wish I hadn't. The leather bag smelled like motor oil and old paper, the exact scent of Earl's hands after a long day in the shop. I set it on the kitchen table, the wood puckering where a mug had sat for years. My hands were shaking so bad I had to breathe out loud just to keep them from spilling its contents across the table like some grotesque confession. First out came a small tape recorder, the kind he used to keep beneath his workbench to hum songs while he fixed bikes. Then a stack of envelopes, yellowed receipts, and a thick manila folder stamped with bank names. Tucked into the folder was a plain USB drive wrapped in masking tape. My heart did a stupid little laugh. Ha ha, like a thing that didn't know it was about to break. I hit play on the recorder with fingers that felt like someone else. Earl's voice filled the kitchen, low, steady, irritated like he'd been caught trying to explain a math problem to a stubborn kid. "If you're listening to this, Margaret," he said, "I didn't die by accident. If I'm not here, don't trust Caleb or Dean with the papers. There's more than you think." I remember laughing at that line because the idea of Earl whispering secrets on a tape was absurd. But then his voice dropped, and the laugh turned into a sob that I couldn't swallow. He said names. He didn't say them like a man pointing fingers in anger. He said them like a man reading a threat out loud. Caleb changed the policy. Dean signed the lien. Watch the transfers. If anything happens, find Daniel Harris. He'll know what to look for. My throat closed. I'd always trusted Earl with numbers and warranties and the tiny miracles of a well-tuned engine. He trusted me with the rest. Now his voice was the map to a place I never wanted to go. I dug through the folder. There were bank statements with withdrawals that didn't line up with Earl's paydays, insurance paperwork with sudden life insurance increases, and a handwritten ledger with notes in Earl's blocky handwriting. Called Daniel, saw Caleb at shop 1012, late night cash taken. If anything, give this to Margaret. There were photos, too, taken on a cheap digital camera, prints that showed Caleb and Dean in the shop at odd hours, their faces half hidden, eyes avoiding the lens like guilty kids. One photo had them standing over Earl's bike with a bottle in the background. Another showed Caleb on his phone with a page of our account balance on the screen, like a receipt of something that had already been stolen. I plugged the USB into my laptop with a trembling that made the keys sing. Files popped up, audio clips, photos, a PDF labeled Policy Change 1005. I opened the audio folder first. There were recordings, short clips that sounded like phone calls. Muffled conversations, a man laughing in a voice that curdled my blood because it sounded so much like Dean's. I listened to a clip where two voices argued about money and timing, one voice saying, "He won't see it coming," and the other replying, "We get the policy through, then we wait." It was like a knife made of words. I pressed my palms flat to my eyes and let weeping do what it needed to do. This wasn't some cold case novel. This was my kitchen table, my husband's voice on a machine, my son's laughter in recorded treachery. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, breathless. "He left more," he said, "and he was scared enough to hide it where only you would look." I told him to come over. I told him to bring whatever he had. When I hung up, the house felt too quiet. The clock on the wall ticked like a judge. I thought of the funeral, of Caleb's jaw like stone and Dean's hands on his phone. I thought of the midnight withdrawals and the way they'd said, "Let us handle it," like a promise, not a threat. I hadn't realized until that minute how small and foolish hope can be. You want to believe your children, God, you want to believe them, until the proof sits on your table and laughs at your faith. I took a deep breath, the kind that tastes like metal in winter. I knew then I had two choices: curl up with my sorrow and be swallowed by it, or stand up, follow this thread, and shred the lie apart. I shoved the USB into my bag, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the rain. The sky was black and honest. I was on my way to see Daniel, and to find out once and for all what Earl had discovered. And when Daniel slid the next file across the table, my hands went cold, because the last voice on that recording wasn't just theirs. It was a voice I never thought I'd hear again. Daniel Harris sat across from me in the diner, his coffee untouched, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the tabletop. I could see it in his eyes, the same fear Earl had carried those last weeks of his life. He slid a folder across to me, thick with documents, photographs, and what looked like legal statements. "Margaret," he said, voice low, "what you're holding isn't just proof of financial shenanigans. This is bigger." I took a deep breath, trying not to cry in public. I hated the way my hands shook, the way my heart thudded like it wanted to escape my chest. "Bigger how?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel hesitated. "Your sons, they were planning this for months. Not just the money from your husband's life insurance, they had a plan for you too. I laughed, an ugly, bitter laugh that caught a few heads in the diner. What? You think Caleb and Dean, my boys, would do that? But the laugh died in my throat when I saw Daniel's serious face. There was no joke here. He opened a manila envelope and slid a set of photographs across the table. My stomach turned. There they were, Caleb and Dean, outside the shop late at night, empty pill bottles in hand. Receipts from pharmacies, tickets for trips they never took me on, bank withdrawals that lined up with suspicious purchases. Each photo was a dagger, and I felt every one cut straight through my chest. They were meticulous, Daniel continued. They forged signatures, falsified accident reports, made sure everything looked like it was normal. Your husband, he knew something was wrong. That's why he hired me before he died. I clutched the folder to my chest, tears blurring my vision. Earl had tried to protect me. He had suspected his own sons. I thought back to their smiles at the funeral, their hands on mine, pretending to care. Pretending. We spent hours going through the files, the diner emptying around us. Each new document was worse than the last. Emails between Caleb and Dean plotting timing, conversations about life insurance payouts, lists of people to manipulate. And then a note, Earl's handwriting. Margaret, if I die before I can tell you, don't trust anyone but Daniel. They won't stop until they have everything. I wept silently, a raw sound that felt like it would never end. I wanted to scream at them, to throw my coffee at the wall, to somehow turn back time and protect him. But grief alone wouldn't save me now. I had to act. By the time we left the diner, rain had turned the streets into mirrors. I clenched the folder under my coat and made a decision. I would not be a victim. Not now, not ever. When we got back to my house, Daniel handed me a small envelope. These are recordings, he said. Phone calls, conversations, your sons didn't know I had them. Play them when you're alone. Alone, the word echoed in my head. Alone with betrayal. Alone with the sons I had loved, who were now my enemies. I shut the door, poured myself a drink, and pressed play. The voices came through, young, arrogant, chillingly familiar. He's getting weaker, Caleb said. She won't suspect a thing. Dean laughed. She's too wrapped up in her grief to see it coming. I slammed the glass down. My breath caught. My boys, my flesh and blood. I could feel bile rise, my chest tightening. How could the people I gave life to plan my death? I wept, yes, but the tears were no longer just sorrow, they were fire. That night, as I sat by the window with rain pelting against the panes, I made a promise to Earl and to myself. They thought I was weak. They thought they had me fooled. They had no idea. I would turn their game inside out, and when I did, they wouldn't see it coming. Because the next morning, I found a clue in Caleb's car that wasn't meant for me, but it would change everything. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the streets of Willow Creek slick and glistening. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying those recordings, Caleb and Dean's voices like daggers. I knew I had to act, but carefully. One wrong move, and they'd know I was onto them. I grabbed my coat and headed out, thinking I'd take a drive to clear my head. That's when I saw it. Caleb's car parked a little too close to the corner shop. Something about it felt off. My heart pounded. I circled the block, trying to appear casual. Then I saw it, a small envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. My pulse raced as I pulled it out. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. The envelope was plain, no name, just a hastily scrawled note inside. If you find this, don't trust anyone. My breath caught. Who could have left this? Was it Earl's planning still somehow working through the universe? Or someone else? Daniel hadn't mentioned anything about this. Inside the envelope were photos, more evidence, but this time they were in color and so close up it was almost creepy. My sons, Caleb and Dean, meeting with some stranger outside town, exchanging what looked like a briefcase. And on the corner of one photo, faint but visible, was a set of numbers, bank account digits, transaction codes. I laughed quietly, a bitter little laugh, feeling a mix of fear and satisfaction. Haha, they thought they were so smart. But they had left a trail, and now I had it. I drove straight to Daniel's office. He was packing when I walked in, a man on edge. You found something, he said without asking. I nodded and showed him the photos and the note. He frowned, rubbing his temples. This changes everything, he muttered. Your sons aren't just greedy, they're bold. They're planning more than we thought. This could be the evidence we need to stop them before it's too late. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not just revenge hope, but the kind that tells you can still survive this nightmare. Daniel started mapping out a plan. We would track their transactions, catch them in the act, and make sure the law saw every lie, every manipulation. Back at home, I went through the photos again, feeling my pulse steady into a rhythm of purpose. I remembered Earl's voice from the recordings. Don't trust anyone but Daniel. He had left me a key to unlock the truth, and now I was ready to use it. That evening, I watched Caleb and Dean from a distance as they met with the same stranger from the photos. They didn't know I was watching, didn't know that their mother, the woman they underestimated, was now the hunter. I could feel my anger bubbling, a fire I had never known. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, about the sons who had tried to take everything from me. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of the leather folder in my bag, the recordings, the photos. Everything Earl had prepared for me was my weapon. And for the first time since his death, I felt a spark of control. Because what I saw next, the stranger handing Caleb something hidden in plain sight, was a mistake they would regret forever. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, blanket around my shoulders, eyes glued to the street where Caleb and Dean's car had parked. Rain had left the pavement wet, the reflection of streetlights shimmering like a warning. I clutched the leather folder Earl had left, the USB drive burning in my pocket. Hours passed, and then I saw them, Caleb and Dean stepping out of their car, meeting the stranger from the photos. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me, this is it. This is the proof. I slipped on my coat, grabbed my camera, and silently crept closer. The wind whispered through the alley, carrying their low voices. I couldn't make out every word, but their tone, the arrogance, the laughter was unmistakable. They were planning, coordinating. It was all there, all the evidence I needed. Caleb handed the stranger a manila envelope. Dean watched, fidgeting, glancing around as if the world might be watching. But I was. Hidden behind a dumpster, I snapped photo after photo, my hands shaking from adrenaline. Every click of the shutter felt like justice. Every movement they made was a confession. The stranger handed back a thick stack of cash. My stomach churned. My sons, my own children, trading our family's future for a few grand. I could feel tears stinging my eyes, hot and bitter, but I swallowed them. No crying now. I had to stay sharp. Once they left, I crept to the alley, checking the scene for anything left behind. There it was, a small notebook dropped near the curb. Caleb had overlooked it. Lucky for me. Inside were lists of transactions, names, dates, amounts, every lie documented, every betrayal spelled out in black ink. I took it all back to Daniel. He examined the notebook, whistling under his breath. Margaret, this is it. Solid proof. They won't be able to wiggle out of this. I felt a strange mix of sorrow and rage. My sons were clever, but they underestimated me. They underestimated the woman who had raised them, who had loved them unconditionally, who now had the full arsenal of truth on her side. We planned our next move carefully. Evidence in hand, recordings saved, photographs cataloged. This was more than a fight, it was a reckoning. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of Earl. If he were here, he would have smiled that lopsided grin and said, "You've got this, Margaret. Don't let them see fear." And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Caleb, not of Dean, not of the betrayal that had cut deeper than anything else in my life. The fire inside me burned. I would confront them. I would bring them down. And when it was done, justice would finally have its day. But I didn't know that. When Caleb answered the phone the next morning, he'd drop a bomb that would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. The phone buzzed like a wasp on the windowsill before dawn. I fumbled for it, sleep still clinging to my bones, and saw Caleb's name light up the screen. My chest did a little hop, maybe hope, maybe something foolish. I answered. "Mom," he said, voice oddly calm, too calm. We need you to come downtown. There's some paperwork real quick. It's about the estate. Don't worry, we'll be there. There was an edge to the words that made my stomach drop. What paperwork? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I already signed what needed signing after the funeral. He hesitated just a heartbeat. It's complicated. Can you just come, Dean, with me? His tone tried for reassurance and landed somewhere cold instead. I should have trusted the instinct that had kept me alive this long. Instead, I went. I put on my coat, smoothed my hair like a woman trying to look ordinary in a clothesline of chaos, and drove to the courthouse with Daniel's folder burning a hole in my bag. The courthouse had that same tired smell, stale coffee, old paper, the way justice sometimes smells like someone else's grief. Caleb was waiting on the steps, hands in his pockets, jaw set. Dean hovered behind him, looking small and guilty all at once. My pulse thudded. I walked up to them. Caleb opened his mouth, and the words dropped like stones. "Mom, we filed for temporary guardianship this morning." His voice was firm, practiced. "The judge signed it. You'll have to come to a hearing next week to contest it. For now, Dean and I are handling your finances. It's easier this way, less stress for you." Everything inside me tilted. A hot laughter bubbled up, ha-ha, sharp and ugly. My sons, the sons I rocked and fed and taught right from wrong, had filed papers to take my name, my freedom, my right to decide. The world went thin around the edges. "How dare you?" I said, but it came out small. My hands shook. "On what grounds? You can't. This is my house, my life." Caleb's eyes were cool. "We're doing what's best, Mom. The doctor's report says you've been distraught. You've been making strange decisions. It's safer for everyone." He held up a stack of papers like a man brandishing proof. My throat closed. Their strategy had teeth. They painted my grief as a sickness. They fed the court a story about a mother lost in mourning, too broken to manage her affairs. It was cruel and elegant, everything calculated to remove me from the room. I felt the world split, one half filled with the memory of Earl humming in his shop, the other with the cold, clinical labels that could cage a person like an animal. The betrayal stung so deep I wanted to scream. But anger is a curious fuel. It doesn't just consume, you can shape it. I thought of Earl's recorder, of the USB, of the damn photographs, the recordings where Caleb and Dean plotted like businessmen rather than sons. I thought of Daniel, packing in the diner like a man about to set a trap. I decided in that stunned, furious minute that I would not let them write my end for me. If they wanted a story of a weak-old mother, I'd give them something else entirely. I would show the court the truth, every forged signature, every midnight transfer, every clipped voice on those recordings proving their guilt. I would turn their paper shield into the very spear that pierced their plan. I pulled out my phone, hands steady now, and called Daniel. "They filed for guardianship," I said, voice thin and bright with purpose. "They think they can take everything, meet me at the law library, bring everything we've got, and bring one other thing. You remember the voice on the last tape? Bring whoever can confirm it." Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 10. His reply was a balm and a battle cry all at once. As I hung up, I looked at Caleb, so sure, so smug, and felt no pity. They had misplayed their hand by thinking they could bully a woman who had been quietly keeping evidence like a loaded gun. They'd mistaken my mourning for weakness. They'd forgotten the part where a mother gets fierce. When we hit the law library, Daniel slid an extra file across the table. Inside was something I never expected to see. My husband's handwriting, confessing not only fear, but a name that would blow the whole case wide open. The law library smelled like old books and whispered secrets. Daniel met me at a corner table, sliding a thick file across. My hands hovered over it. Inside, Earl's handwriting sprawled across every page, notes, diagrams, calculations, even small doodles of his shop. But this wasn't just a collection of thoughts. This was a blueprint, a confession, and a trap all in one. He had recorded everything, anticipating the worst. Every suspicious transaction, every late-night visit by Caleb and Dean, every whispered plan, they were all documented. And in his handwriting, in that familiar looping script, he had named someone I had never even considered, the stranger. The one who had handed over cash and packages in the alley. Earl's note said this person had agreed to testify if anything happened to him. I felt a shiver, a mix of awe and horror. Earl had seen betrayal coming and built an invisible safety net around me, knowing I would one day need it. Sigh, I hadn't realized the depths of his foresight. Daniel and I began to organize everything: photographs, recordings, receipts, and now Earl's notes. We made a timeline, a map of their greed, deceit, and murderous intent. I could feel anger simmering, hot and precise, fueling every thought. These weren't just my sons. They were dangerous, calculating. They had underestimated the quiet fire of a mother scorned. Later, we went through the recordings again. Hearing Caleb and Dean's plotting was surreal, almost cinematic. "She's too blind to see us coming," Dean laughed in one clip. "The money's ours," Caleb added. Their arrogance was suffocating. I felt a mix of disgust and a strange thrill. These boys had made the mistake of thinking I was powerless. Haha, little did they know. The plan was simple but risky: confront the court with irrefutable proof. No hearsay, no guesswork. Every forged signature, every transaction, every plotting conversation would be laid bare. And then the twist: they would never see the final piece coming. As I looked at Daniel, my resolve hardened. This wasn't about revenge in the small sense. This was justice, wrapped in the cunning Earl had left behind. My sons thought they had manipulated me, the grieving mother. They thought they had won. But with Earl's foresight, Daniel's expertise, and my own rage sharpened into clarity, the board was set. That night I couldn't sleep. I imagined the courtroom, their faces turning from smug to shocked as the truth unfolded. I imagined myself standing tall, voice steady, eyes blazing, not a victim anymore, but a force. And in the back of my mind, a whisper of excitement, the twist that even they wouldn't see coming. Because by the next morning, as Caleb strutted into the courthouse, a package arrived. Inside, a recording so damning it would change everything. And they didn't know it was already too late. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and anxiety. I clutched the folder Earl had left me, every document, recording, and photograph carefully organized. Daniel was beside me, eyes sharp, ready. Caleb and Dean entered, faces smug, still believing their little guardianship scheme would work. They didn't even glance at me. Oh, how that would change. The trial began. Their lawyer opened with rehearsed confidence, painting me as a grieving, unstable mother, vulnerable and incapable. I could feel their smirks from the gallery. Sigh, how ironic that they thought this performance could cage me. When my turn came, I stepped up slowly, letting the silence settle. My voice trembled at first, but then strength came, fueled by grief and fury. I played the first recording. Caleb's arrogant laughter echoed across the courtroom. Dean's plotting words followed. Gasps filled the room. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Daniel handed me the photographs, lined up like evidence from a detective show. The envelopes, the transactions, every forged signature, it was all undeniable. My son's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of proof. Haha, justice tastes sweeter than fear, I realized. Then I revealed the twist Earl had left. The stranger, now a witness, came forward with a recording of Caleb and Dean taking a dangerous step, proof of intent that went beyond greed. Their eyes widened, their mouths opening and closing like fish. They had never expected this witness, never expected this recording, never expected me. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to claim my freedom away, it all fell apart in a symphony of truth. I spoke of Earl's foresight, their plotting, and their betrayal. I let the courtroom feel my pain, my heartbreak, but also my unbroken will. The judge listened, rapt. The jury, stunned. My sons could only stare, powerless. By the end, it was clear. Caleb and Dean had overplayed their hand. Guilty on every count: conspiracy, attempted manipulation, and fraud. Their world of greed and lies shattered in front of the town that had once admired them. As the gavel fell, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow washed over me. It wasn't revenge in the bitter sense. It was justice, a balance restored. I thought of Earl and whispered a thank you, imagining his lopsided grin. The plan he'd left behind had worked. But the twist wasn't over. As I left the courtroom, I held the folder to my chest. I realized that true power wasn't just exposing them, it was reclaiming my life. I wasn't just Margaret, the grieving widow. I was Margaret, the mother who had outsmarted her sons, honored her husband, and would now live on her own terms. Because that evening, back at home, I found one last note from Earl, something that would reveal a secret even Caleb and Dean never imagined, and it would change everything about the life I thought I had lost. Back at home, the house felt different, quiet but alive. I sank into Earl's old armchair, the folder of evidence now resting safely on the table. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the weight of the courtroom victory settle. Caleb and Dean were behind bars. Justice had been served. Sigh, yet something inside me told me Earl's work wasn't finished. I reached for a small envelope tucked under the arm of the chair. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, Earl's handwriting curling with the care he always put into the simplest things. But this wasn't ordinary, it was a final twist. Margaret, it read, if you're reading this, you've survived what I feared most. There's one thing you should know about the stranger, about the recordings, about your sons. They never realized what they were part of. You have the power now, not just to reclaim your life, but to build something that lasts. And then a key fell out of the envelope. A key to a safety deposit box I didn't know existed. Inside the box, documents for a trust Earl had set up for me, for the victims of family betrayal, a foundation he had quietly planned before his death. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't help it. This was more than inheritance. This was a life reborn. I realized something profound in that moment. My son's betrayal, the grief, the plotting, the danger, it all had a purpose I hadn't yet seen. Earl had given me the tools not just to survive, but to thrive. I had justice, evidence, and now a mission. The foundation would help others like me, people betrayed by those they loved most. And the twist, the stranger, the witness who had testified against Caleb and Dean, was someone Earl had known decades ago. Not a coincidence, not luck. Earl had orchestrated every angle. Even in death, he had been my partner in ensuring that truth and justice would prevail. Months later, the Ernest Cole Foundation, named for the man who had protected me even from beyond, was thriving. I spoke at events, shared my story, and helped victims reclaim their lives. I laughed again, freely. I loved again, carefully. And in every moment I carried Earl's wisdom, his foresight, and the fire he left in me. Looking back, I realized the greatest betrayal had taught me the greatest lesson. Strength comes from truth, courage comes from facing the unimaginable, and family is defined not by blood, but by loyalty, love, and respect. Caleb and Dean had thought they could break me. They had no idea they were the architects of my rebirth. I leaned back in the armchair, a small, satisfied smile tugging at my lips. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, exposed the evil, honored the truth, and now, with Earl's final gift, I had transformed grief into power. And as I watched the sunset over Willow Creek, I whispered to the wind. They thought they won, but I rewrote the ending. Here's a more engaging, emotional, and YouTube-friendly cue rewritten in your style, keeping it natural, conversational, and suspenseful. If this story gave you chills, made your heart race, or even brought a tear to your eye, drop a comment below. I really want to know what you would have done in Margaret's shoes. I read every single one, and your thoughts keep this channel alive. Smash that like button if you love twists, suspense, and emotional stories, and don't forget to hit subscribe. I promise to bring you more stories that will make you laugh, cry, and sit on the edge of your seat, heart pounding. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and remember, even after betrayal, even after heartbreak, courage, truth, and love always find their way back.